Hello, I'm Claudia Rickert Isom. I'm a senior judge here in Tampa, Florida, and I'm also a member of the Florida Bar Standing Committee on Professionalism. Welcome to our webinar, Feeling the Burn, Reignite Your Career, How Lawyers Can Reinvent Themselves Professionally. This is a 1-hour CLE approved webinar presented by the Florida Bar Standing Committee on Professionalism. At the end of today's session, we'll be giving you the number and how you can get your certificate and qualify for credit for today's attendance. Our panel today includes Shanique Mills Maynard. She is a magistrate judge for the Southern District of Florida. And I've heard it tell that she treats clients like human beings, imagine that, and shows them true empathy. We also have Janice Corrine Haywood. She is a graduate of the Florida Bar Leadership Academy, and she's been described while in the academy as being always pleasant, cooperative, and timely. You can count on Janice. We also have Amy Singer-Bourbon. She is the Chief Legal Officer and Chief Operating Officer at the Clerk of the Circuit Court and Comptroller's Office for Palm Beach County. She is a true team builder, a member of voluntary bar associations, and she's going to tell you a little bit about leaving the bullpen. We thank all of our panelists for taking their valuable time to offer us insight on how we can avoid the burn and keep our candles burning bright. Recently, Judge Marva Crenshaw shared with me that she chooses her extracurricular activities by asking herself, will it bring me joy? While your legal career may not bring you joy, it should always bring you a sense of fulfillment and satisfaction. If it doesn't meet those criteria, change it. We don't want you to leave the law entirely, although we do have some shining examples of creative ways to use your law degree. Examples like Carla Jimenez, who after a very successful legal career decided to co-own and operate Inkwood, an independent bookstore. She operated that for over 21 years, and I was a very happy customer and so surprised to find out that she was an attorney. Another shining example is Amy Hills Martinez Montfort, who created the Laundry Company, a very creative approach to commercial laundry whose mission is, quote unquote, think clean thoughts. I love that. A 2015 Florida Bar membership survey reported that 33% of Florida lawyers listed high stress as a major problem. 32% said that balancing work and family was a significant challenge, and 7 out of 10 said that they would change careers if they could. You guys, we have invested so much in our careers as attorneys. We deserve to have the law give back a return on our investment that is more than just billable hours. If you find yourself describing your position as so busy and yet so bored, take a listen to our panelists today who will give you some ideas about how you can avoid burnout and reignite your career. At the end of today's webinar, our immediate past chair and current mentoring committee leader, Jason Berger, will provide some more news you can use, and Katie Young will remind us how we can get our CLE credit. And Katie, I'm sorry I left out. Katie is the Assistant Director of the Henry Latimer Center for Professionalism, another wonderful program of the Florida Bar. Well, let's start with Judge Maynard. Judge Maynard, can you tell us about yourself and your career path?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Judge Isom, and to the Standing Committee for inviting me to participate. I'm very excited about today's conversation. So a little bit about myself. I am a magistrate judge serving in the Southern District of Florida. I sit in the Fort Pierce Division. There was a time when I would have to explain to people where Fort Pierce is, but given more recent events, most people know where we are now. I grew up in Fort Pierce. My dad was the 11th of 12 children, the 7th son of 7 boys right here on the Treasure Coast. And growing up here, I didn't have a lot of people in my family who'd gone to college. There were no lawyers, there were no judges in my family. And all I could think about was how I wanted to graduate and get as far away from home as I could. I graduated from high school, went on to Howard University, went on to Yale Law School and clerked in 2001. And then I started my career as an associate at the law firm of Sherman and Sterling in the Washington, D.C. office. Sherman is a big law firm. And, at that time, it was like my life was set. Here I was, the small town girl from Fort Pierce in the big city, making more money than anybody in my family had ever seen, excited to be an associate at a big law firm. And in 2003, tragedy struck my family and my brother was killed in Fort Pierce. And so for me, that was really the first real turning point in my career, because I went from, young new lawyer to experiencing our justice system from the perspective of a victim, from the perspective of a client, from the perspective of someone who wasn't arguing the case or deciding the case, but whose actual life was in the hands of the folks who work in our court system. And it really caused me to think about what I wanted out of my career as a lawyer. I decided that part of what I wanted was to be able to be a voice for folks who were like me and who had experienced these types of things. So in 2007, I went to the Southern District of Florida United States Attorney's Office as a federal prosecutor. I worked there. I worked in Miami, then I worked in West Palm, and then ultimately I came back to Fort Pierce, all as a prosecutor, federal prosecutor. Had the wonderful opportunity to do incredible cases on behalf of the United States, everything from sex abuse cases, drug cases, firearm cases, white collar fraud, you name it, I had the opportunity to do it. In around about 2012, I found myself in the U.S. Attorney's Office here in Fort Pierce. Life had sort of worked out where I'd come back to Fort Pierce. And I was very shocked to find that the violence problem where I had grown up had become even worse. About 10 years had passed. And, some of the perpetrators were even younger. Many of the victims were even younger than my brother had been. And so again, this was sort of a pivotal moment in my life, because here I was prosecuting these types of cases, but also recognizing that we were limited in what we could achieve just from the side of prosecution. And so as part of that, I started to look into community ways and responses to violence. I got the opportunity to lead a nonprofit that our community was launching here on the Treasure Coast to reduce violence amongst young people, particularly juveniles involved in gangs. In 2014, I decided to leave the U.S. Attorney's Office, leave practicing the law. I took a huge pay cut to lead this nonprofit doing this work I was incredibly passionate about. I did that for 3 years, working with the National Gang Center and the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention. And we created an incredible program that within the first 2 years had reduced juvenile violence in our community by 30%. So that was incredible. And I did that for 3 years. And then life happened again. My husband's job folded and he got laid off. And I had to think about returning to the law. And someone told me, oh, well, they're looking for a magistrate judge. You've practiced in federal court. You should apply. First thought that came to my mind was negative thinking. Oh, they'll never hire you. You haven't been in a courtroom for 3 or 4 years. But despite that negative thinking, I went for it anyway, and I got the job. And I've been in this position since June of 2017. So that's my path, and I look forward to talking more about how to avoid burnout and reignite your career.
Well, thank you. Ms. Borman, can you tell us about your path? And I like to think of it as going from the dream of becoming an attorney to the reality of practicing law. Describe your path.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And I want to thank Mike Simon for inviting me to be part of this panel. I really appreciate it. With Judge Maynard, I have some similarities and some differences. And you'll see the similarities more towards the end of my story. So I went to the University of Florida for undergrad, and I went to Georgetown University Law Center for for law school. And when I left in 1992, it was not a good time in the legal practice. So I came back home to West Palm Beach. And how I got my first job was my mother was sitting at a homeowner association meeting next to a partner at a firm where Mike used to work. and said, oh, my daughter's graduating from law school. You looking for anybody? And that's actually how I got my first job. It had nothing to do with anything I had done because I had gone to Georgetown. One of the reasons was to do a criminal clinic. And I loved criminal law. I didn't care if I would be a prosecutor or a defense attorney. I just knew I wanted to do criminal work. And when I came out, there was a freeze at the state attorney's office. There was a freeze at the public defender's office, both offices I had applied to. And I got a job at the firm in Boca Raton, Florida, where Mike was a senior associate. And I think a week into my job, I got a call from the PD's office saying, okay, we're making you an offer. The freeze just got lifted. And I had just moved, I had just started, and I didn't think it was the right thing to do. So I turned my criminal career now into civil litigation. And I don't know if it was the right path for me, but I was there for 2 years. And then I left and I went to a firm. It was a small firm. I think we had about 10 attorneys. And Mike was probably the next youngest person to me who I could relate to. I think there's an associate that came in after me as well. But for me, it's very important, and you'll hear that story later on, to have a team and to have people that I can relate to and I can rely on. I ended up leaving there and I went to a solo practitioner for a year trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And then people always say you never find jobs in a newspaper. Well, I actually did. I found a job working as an assistant legal advisor at the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office. And it was a phenomenal job. It was the right job for me in my late 20s. I got to go on raids. I got to go in a helicopter. I had a take-home car. It was fantastic. It was fun. And I got married and I got pregnant and I decided that I was going to take a step back. And I ended up resigning once I had my first daughter, who's now 26, and spent nine years at home, 2 daughters. And I always kept my hand in it. I would do some freelance work. I'd work about 10 hours a week. I got hooked up with different firms. I'd cover depots. I'd cover motions for summary judgment. I'd draft discovery. I would just do different things. And I sort of hodgepodge together a way of staying involved, but yet being at home, getting involved in the PTA and doing all of the things that I also wanted to do. I had no free time for myself. That is burnout. Like Judge Maynard, there was a situation with my husband who got laid off that then propelled me to say, I need to do something. Do I either gather more clients or do I start looking for a full-time job? So again, I went to the newspaper, which most people don't find jobs in a newspaper, and it was for general counsel at the 15th Circuit. I had no idea what that was, but I said, why not? Why would they, same sort of self-doubt, why would they hire me? I'm a stay-at-home mom. Why would they want me? And long and short, I got it. And the chief judge saw something in me. The panel saw something in me. I was able to leverage my skills working with PTA, working as a freelance attorney. And I got that job and I loved it. And I was over the law clerks. I was the attorney for 54 judges and 9 magistrates. And I was there for 12 years. But then I started getting burnt out. So I had to make a pivot. And at that time, I ended up just leaving. And you'll learn more about this, but I also taught. So I always had a passion for teaching. And I had started hodgepodging different teaching assignments. So at FAU, in undergrad, I started actually in law school in Stanley Kaplan teaching the LSAT prep course. I then went to Lynn University, FAU, did some undergrad work while I was at home. Then I started getting more into it. I created a law school course that I taught at UF Law Stetson and Nova. And I ended up leaving the court and I started teaching more and I created my own training program on the rules of judicial administration because that's a committee that I sat on. I'm going to wrap this up in a minute. That I sat on for through the Florida bar. And a lot of people don't know those rules. And I said, you know what, let me go teach it. This is pre-COVID. I didn't know about Zoom, and had I stuck with it, it would have been a statewide endeavor. But in the meantime, I was approached by the clerk's office, which is where I am now. And that was due to relationships, because at the court, I had met people at the clerk's office and they said, we would like you to come work with us. We have a branch director position open. We can use your legal mind running the operations of the branches, using your knowledge about the court system. So I came on We had a new clerk elected. He promoted me to chief operating officer over courts and then again over the legal office. So that is where I am now, and that is my journey.
Well, I'm getting breathless just keeping up with you. That I think your path is maybe like a marathon there. You've really covered a lot of ground. Thank you. All right, Miss Haywood, I've read a lot about you online, and as you can tell, I talked to some folks about your leadership skills. Can you tell us about your path?
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Judge Isom. And thank you for this wonderful panel, all these wonderful panelists. My name is Janice Haywood. So I was born and raised in Miami, Florida. My parents are immigrants. They came over from Haiti. And I was the first one to go to law school. Like Judge Maynard, there was no lawyers, none of that in my family. I went to the University of Florida for undergrad. Practicing law was not my first career. So my first career, I was a social worker for DCF in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And that's actually what got me to even think about going to law school. You know, I've always wanted to be in a career to help others. And I remember being in court and, you know, as a social worker, you know, you go to court with your assigned assistant attorney general to make recommendations regarding the family that you were dealing with. And there were two things that stuck out to me. One was I had a young lady on my case who had psychiatric issues who needed emergency surgery. And the surgeon called me late at night to get permission. And I was like, well, I can't get permission. I have to call a supervisor to call the courts and call this. And I remember the surgeon saying, so you're going to have a child die because you need a court order? But at that point, I didn't understand the court system. And second, I went to court and I remember asking all these questions to my attorney assigned. And she said, have you ever thought about going to law school? Because you sure ask a lot of questions. And that's what made me go. She's actually a general magistrate here in Broward County today. And we joke about it all the time. But I went to law school and I was hired by the Broward County State Attorney's Office. I knew when I went into law school that I wanted to do criminal. And so I was hired by the Broward County State Attorney's Office in Broward County. So I came back home and I worked there for a couple of years. I bought a house with my sister and realized I cannot survive on the Broward County State Attorney's Office in Broward County on a state attorney's salary. So I left and went to a private firm for 2 years. But then I realized how unhappy I was. You know, it's billable hours. I was working all day, Saturday and Sunday. Anybody ever done, you know, civil? And I said, well, this is not it. Like, why did I go to law school? I wasn't married at the time. I did not have any children. So I applied to the DCF office in Miami. They needed attorneys. And I said, well, let me go back to what inspired me to go to law school in the first place. And so I went and I interviewed in Miami. And I remember them saying, you're going to have a 50% pay cut. We can't pay you what you're making. And I said, that's fine. And so I started working there. And it's a joke because my husband and I now were dating. And he said, had he known that we were dating, that we probably would have got married. But I got the pay cut. I started working there and I worked my way up to division chief. And then I was approached by the Southern Region Director of DCF, who asked me to come in-house with DCF to help train investigators because the investigators did not understand the law of Chapter 39 and also how to present in court. And so I went in-house with them for about a year and a half to develop their program, their training program, and then they lost funding. So they lost funding for my position. At that time, I was pregnant with my second child, and I went back to DCF in Broward, but had to take a demotion in position because there were no division chief positions. So I went back to being a line attorney in Broward, worked my way back up to division chief. And so all in all, I probably did dependency law for about 10 years. Then there came a point where there was no more growth in my career and I wanted to make a move, but I knew that I was in a niche type of area of law where I could not make the move that I wanted to. So like Ms. Borman, I went to USA Jobs and just started applying for any job that I can find because I'm like, well, let me try to find another position to go to. I don't know where I'm going to start. But then I communicated with one of my friends who worked in financial services who helped me connect me with someone who could rebrand me in order to make myself more marketable to transfer my skills into where I'm currently today. So currently I'm an assistant chief counsel with the Department of Homeland Security. I represent the United States government against non-citizens, terrorists, and human rights violators. So I can talk more about how that transition happened. I've been there 5 years. I love the job and I'm happy to be here.
Wow. Again, I'm breathless trying to keep up with you. All right. Well, I think, we have some ideas for things to talk about together today. And I think we've all talked about finding that first job so we can move on from there. And now we're going to ask Ms. Borman to talk about the logistics of knowing how and when it's time for you to make a change in your chosen legal career path.
Thank you. So as you've heard, sometimes it's just circumstances. I chose, my first move was more whether or not I was happy. Did I like doing civil work? Was I happy? And there comes a point if you're crying or you're just don't want to get to the office and you're finding that your work is suffering, you have to really make the decision, is this right for me? What do I want? And sometimes it can take, like I took a year to try to figure out, what do I want? My dad, who's a lawyer, had always said, work for the government, work for the government. And of course, in law school, you're like, no, I need to make money. Working for the government is rewarding because you're doing, you're not worrying about billable hours. You're just thinking about doing the right thing for your client. And you really, are a servant to the people. So that's why I said I loved working at the sheriff's office. My decision to leave that was it was because I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. I wanted to sort of do that balance of working a little bit. Some of the questions that were asked with this is, do you change after you pay off your loans? When I was at the court, I supervised law clerks, and I hired somebody who went to University of Michigan, had lots of loans, worked for one of the big firms in Chicago. I think it was in Chicago. In 2 years or 3 years, he said he slept on every partner's couch, pulled all-nighters, paid off his loans, and then took probably $100,000 pay cut to come work for me as a law clerk. Then after working for me, he took another pay cut to become a state attorney. And then he started moving on because that was his passion. But he did what he needed to do in order to pay off his loan. So whether or not you stay with the government and you do the loan forgiveness, or you're in a law school program where they have the law, I think it's called the LRAP program, that can be a decision for you on when to go. Another issue of making that change is insurance. So when you work for the government, you have great insurance. And my husband had been working in areas that my insurance was much better. And we have a child who has health issues. So insurance for me was very important, and I had to make sure I had that. When my husband got a different position that had the same health insurance and I knew the expensive medication would be covered, I sort of had some freedom and I knew I could leave. So there are financial constraints of when you can leave. If you can figure out a way that can also propel you to your next move. So it's really also about finding happiness. And when I went to the court after leaving being a stay-at-home mom, the chief judge at the time, I said to her, can I just come part-time? She said, no, I really need you full-time. So I don't know if I can do it. She said, you can do it. So I made a promise to myself that I would stay until I was unhappy. And I kept that promise until I felt burnt out or until it was too much. And I just knew, and I knew, and then as I started feeling that, I started applying for jobs in the teaching field, down at Nova, down at FIU, and I was the first runner-up to a lot of things. I never got it. And then it was more fortuitous because it led me to where I am now. So that to me is just some logistics of knowing when. It can be your happiness, it can be the financial considerations, but you have to sort of know your plan and then let's follow it through.
Well, thank you. So you never took it as a big no or a hard stop. It was just a way to tell you maybe you should take a different turn in the road.
Right. There were signs, there was whatever it was. And when it came to be, it's like, okay, this is the opportunity. This is what I need to do.
All right. Thank you. And now, Ms. Haywood, you already mentioned a little bit about mentors. Since we are here on behalf of the mentorship committee, can you tell us the importance of mentors in your career decisions?
Yes, mentors are absolutely important, whether they are mentors in the legal field, mentors who are not in the legal field. I believe that any person that can pour into you or direct you on the right path or direct you not to go on a path is a mentor. And so I've had several of those. You know, my chief in juvenile when I was in the Broward County State Attorney's Office was my first real mentor after law school. And she was phenomenal because I saw how she ran a juvenile division as a supervisor, but she loved trials. And so she still continued to handle juvenile homicides. And she was a wife and she was a mother. And I remember sitting there just questioning her about how she did what she did. And she was able to provide me tips and tools that I still to this day, when I was a division chief, applied it to my own career because I loved doing trials, but I also supervised a team as well. And I was able, based on her example, able to navigate and do that. I had another mentor and when I was in Miami who stressed the importance of just taking care of yourself, going on vacation. You know, I had that mentality, especially coming out of a civil law firm, that even if you take off, you still have your phone on you, your laptop, you're still working from wherever you're at. Hey, what's the Wi-Fi code? And she, at one point, would take away my phone. She's like, "You going on vacation? Okay, you know, Haywood, give me your phone, give me your stuff. I'm going to hold it. You're going on vacation." You know, and she really ingrained that in me so much that, again, that's something that I practice. And if I find myself picking my phone up, I'm like, nope, I'm on vacation. They will survive if I don't answer an email right away. So that was important. And then I had a judge in the felony trial unit that who I still speak to. He was an assistant U.S. attorney before he went and became a judge, and he has been influential to me in any type of changes. He, when I was thinking about making a career change, he assisted me, told me about the federal courts, told me, exactly help me out, any doubts I had. So I just think that mentors in all levels. And then I spoke about the individual who helped me, connect me with somebody who was able to help me transform and rebrand myself. She was in the financial industry, and she was able to help me connect me in order to do that. So I do believe mentorship is very important. Not only someone that pours into you, but it's important for us to be mentors as well. If I see a young attorney or if I see a young paralegal or someone, and I know that I can pour into them, I always take the opportunity to do so because I know how beneficial it has been for me.
Wonderful. All right. Judge, we all have life challenges, and sometimes those life challenges inspire us. Tell us about life challenges that you've met during your career.
Yeah, I spoke a little bit about losing my brother and how that played such a fundamental role for me in making my next moves. I also have one of my children has special needs. And so that was also a life challenge that I had to address and overcome as I was on my career path. And, when I think about burnout and when I've transitioned, it just comes to me that it was better for me when I was transitioning because I was running towards something as opposed to running away from something. So when I felt like I'm so burnt out, I just can't take it, I have to leave, that was often not the best space for me to be making a change in. That was really a space for me to look at. I'm more burnt out at the pace, right? Maybe I'm not getting adequate rest or adequate exercise or adequate nourishment, or my spiritual practice is not in a good space. But when I became, and I hate to say it this way, but almost like burnt out with the mission of the work, that was really when I was able to make the smartest changes for my career. So when I enjoyed being a civil litigator, I enjoyed being an associate, but when I really started to think, in large part because of my life challenges, what do I want with this gift and skill set that God has given to me as a lawyer? What do I want to be doing with it? What do I want to be working on? How do I want to be making a difference? That was a real motivator that led me into the next great work. And then I loved my work as a prosecutor. And, again, there were times as a trial lawyer where the pace, the burnout, the stress, I was like, oh, I can't take it anymore. But that wasn't really the time to move. The time to move was when I got into the space again, where I said, I appreciate the mission, but I think there's something else I can be doing with my career to have more impact. So I guess that's just a long way of saying, burnout is one thing, but when you're transitioning in and out of career spaces, I think it's important to really know why you're making the move and not to run away, but rather to run towards doing something that gives you more fulfillment. And that changes as we go along. The things that give me fulfillment now as an attorney and a judge are not the same things that when I first became a lawyer, I wanted to travel with my firm. I wanted to, do all this exciting stuff. I mean, I have 3 kids. Now I like to be at home. My priorities have changed. But knowing what those priorities are, I think is really, really important when you're thinking of making a transition.
All right, thank you. So we are going back to Ms. Borman. Ms. Borman, when I was looking at some comments about you online, it sounds like you run a very effective team. Can you tell me the importance of having a great team, even if you're not the quarterback, but having a great team supporting you and the position that you're holding?
Absolutely. So when I think that the first time I really felt the benefit of a team is when I was general counsel at the court, and I had law clerks or staff attorneys that I worked with and I was able to mentor. And I know we're going to talk a little bit about mentoring and advice to law students and new attorneys, but that gave me fulfillment. That gave me knowing I had them and knowing that they would ask me for advice and knowing that I would help place them in jobs. And I was sort of a pseudo headhunter, for lack of a better term, which is actually a job I tried to apply for because I decided I actually liked it. But I realized when they would come back to my holiday parties and they always reached out to me, it was, my team became my work family. And then when I moved to the clerk's office, I work, there's a team that I work with that from the operations side, from the legal side, and then the executive level. And they are very, very supportive, both of our staff and of us. And I recently have gone through some challenging times and they have been there for me. They have just really, I love my job because of the people I work with. And I think that's part of being happy where you work, is liking the people that you work with. And sometimes the work may get monotonous or maybe redundant or maybe stressful, but you have a team that you can rely on and that bounces you back and they act as a sounding board. So I think having, and if you're in a small firm and you don't have that, build your team through other networks, whether it's the bar associations you're involved in, if you're in a book club, if you're in, doesn't have to be a work team. It could be another team, but people that you can bounce your ideas off of, you can talk to, you can cry to if you need to. It's very important and it makes your job that much better and it stops the burnout.
Well, thank you. I know they say that it's always important to help you see around the corner so that you can see things from their point of view. And it sounds like you have used your team to help you get good input and feedback so that your team really serves the people in your circuit.
100%.
All right. So we're going to go back to our judge. As you know, I am a retired judge. And one of the things about being a judge is you really are a judge 24/7. And even when I'm singing in a musical group or going to a movie, it can be kind of awkward. Has being a judge affected your ability to do those extracurricular things that kind of makes life fun and interesting?
It's such an interesting question because I recently had someone tell me when I was feeling somewhat burnt out that what I was missing was fun. And I was like, fun? What is that? But when I think about it, I think the things that I have thought of as fun, things that really get me energized and excited, are things that I've incorporated into my work as a judge. I also incorporated them into my work as a prosecutor and when I was running a nonprofit. One of the things that I really think is fun is working with young people, working with students, the next generation. As a prosecutor, I would do presentations at schools. I would read to students. Running a nonprofit geared towards young people, I got a chance to work a lot with young people at the Boys and Girls Club and other youth organizations. And now as a judge, I really make great efforts to incorporate civic engagement and bringing students into our courthouse as part of my work. I've been on the bench now for almost 7 years, and I have brought around 500 or 600 students, high school students, into our courts to do mock trials, panel discussions, essay and art contests, tours of the courthouse. And it's delightful to me. I mean, it really, a lot of times in courtrooms, we are faced with very serious, sometimes very sad, very tragic circumstances. And so being able to bring young people into the courthouse is very, very rewarding and really gives me a sense of happiness and fulfillment. And in fact, it's part of how I decided myself to become a lawyer, because the state attorney's office and the 19th Judicial Circuit did a program called Teen Court. So I was in 9th grade when they brought students in, and we got a chance to do a mock trial and work with prosecutors and argue in front of a judge. And I remember that moment as being like a light bulb moment for me of like, I could do this work, I could be this voice. And so that's how I keep this job fun, because we're always doing something where we're reaching out to young people, reaching out to the community, and keeping a smile on our face, despite what can sometimes be serious and tragic work.
Excellent. All right, now we're going to turn to some really serious things to talk about, a little more statistics for you. In a 2016 ABA Hazelton Betty Ford study, lawyers responded that 36 of the people responding suffer from alcohol abuse, 28% report problems with depression, 23% report problems with stress, and 19% report problems with anxiety. National studies report that lawyers are twice as likely as the general population to commit suicide, that the alcoholism rate for lawyers is double that of the general population. 33% of us suffer from diagnosed mental disorders, and we are 3.6 times more likely to suffer from severe depression. Members of the panel, these numbers do not paint a healthy picture for us. What should we do? Janice, do you want to respond?
Yes, and those statistics are alarming. And, I think that for me, when I was a past president of TJ Reddick Bar Association in Broward County, that was one of my biggest pillars was mental health. And I think it really hit home for myself and for my community is that we had a lawyer who, for all intents and purposes, looked like he had it together, right? Just well-dressed, always volunteering, leading up so many different panel discussions, and innovative in his thinking. And then he committed suicide. And no one, it was a shock. It was just a shock to like, what did we miss? Like he was always around and had all these aspirations. And so then I brought in the Florida Bar General Counsel, came in and did a mental health programming with us. And he also brought in different companies and facilities that they work with. And one thing that he continued to stress was that, I don't want to say getting in front of it, but if you just notice a decline in someone, it doesn't have to be drastic. I think sometimes when we think about mental health, we automatically go to a diagnosis, but an event can cause a mental health a lapse in judgment, right? Someone passing away, et cetera. And, he talked about different programs where people can go in voluntary to get the services, talked about the helpline, and talked about, I think that brought a lot of information to our group that wasn't well known. They always thought, well, only until something happens, then you get help. And so I think more members, especially in Broward County, have been doing that going forward and getting help. Hey, I just need someone to talk to, kind of a thing. And I just think that we need to just, for myself, is make that more a norm and not a wait until a crisis happens. I think we should get in front of it before the crisis happens. But it all comes down to education and having the information available.
Thank you. And we did, since this was about the danger of burning out, we did want to tell everybody the Florida Bar has some great resources. We have the Florida Lawyers Helpline, 833-351-9355, Florida Lawyers Assistance, Attorney Mental Health Education. There's a lot of resources that you can access online. And I don't know, how do you say, operators are waiting to take your call? because we don't want you to burn out. We want you to reignite your career, and we want you to love the law like you did when you decided to become a lawyer. So
they were the actually ones, I'm sorry, the Florida Lawyers Assistants were actually the ones who came out to speak, and they're willing to speak to, I mean, they had a moms group for new moms going out who's going back. They have so many programs, and they're always willing to go speak with any organization, any law firm. So I just want to throw that out there. I don't work for them, and I don't get any proceeds.
that's okay. They need all the cheerleaders they can get, because it's so important to all of us. And I think that whenever we come to a stopping point or a barrier or a challenge in our career, we have to remember why we wanted to be lawyers. Did we want to be lawyers for us, or did we want to be lawyers for others? And there's still so many people that need us to be great lawyers, to be great judges, and to help them understand the system and how to succeed. All right, well, we're going to move on to kind of a summation, if you will. I'm going to ask all of you to think about, if you were 18, if you were 20, and you were thinking, oh, I might want to be a lawyer. What kind of advice do you think you would give to people thinking about the law as a noble profession? All right, so Judge, you want to start with you?
Yeah, I think that what I would say is there are so many different ways that our skills can be used as lawyers. I mean, there are almost as many, even we hear all the jobs and career paths that we on the panel have taken. There's so many ways to be a lawyer and to do this work. And it won't always look the same over time. It'll transition. You'll go into different jobs. But what I always try to tell young lawyers is every space that you're in, make sure you're learning and honing your skill set. The Bible says a man or woman's gift will make room for them. And every place that I worked taught me a great deal. And whether it was the training, it may have been more research writing oriented, or it may have been more advocating in court, but your work wherever you are is to become the best you can be at that skill set in that moment. Because what opened doors for me later was the skill set that I had honed, right? It wasn't just, oh, I'm ready to go, let me become a magistrate judge or let me run a nonprofit. It was because I had developed the skill set and taken from each place what I needed to get so that I was prepared for the next door it was time for me to go through. So I would just say, every space you are, learn what there is to be taught, become the best you can be at what you're learning, develop the relationships that you will need, and enjoy the work as a lawyer.
Oh, thank you. All right, so Ms. Borman, I had a friend when I worked for agency here in Florida, whose son, he was so proud. He got into the University of Chicago. He got one of those silk stocking jobs, decided that billable hours were going to break his career. What advice would have you given to that young man?
Leave? No, I'm kidding. Well, the problem is whenever you're in a private firm, you have the billable hours, and you're going to have to meet those requirements. You just have to figure out, is that the right fit for you? I do not like billable hours. I did not do well at that. I could not, I mean, I know there's now software that is different than the pen and paper that I had to put my time and try to recreate it at the end of the day or the end of the week. But if you can hold out and you can use it, as I gave the example before with one of my former law clerks, and you need that to pay off your loans, do that, and then do something that makes you happy. And those billable hours may make you happy. I know people that enjoy doing that, and that is great. You just need to know what you want. There's other areas of practice where you could get into real estate, where you may not be charging by the hour, you may be charging by the transaction. So there's other areas in the private sector, not necessarily the government, where you can stay there and not have to worry about the billables. But for those of you who are on this call and have the billables, you know what I'm talking about. It's the bane of everybody's existence. You either accept it. You know, when I had a bill because I was getting paid when I was doing it work for myself, I didn't mind it because that's how I was getting paid. So I was like, okay, I don't mind billing. But you just have to understand what makes you happy. And there are financial considerations around all of this. And once you're in a place where you can make that move, don't be afraid, because you can, you know, and I'm gonna pitch government work again. You may start off, it may be starting off in a lower salary, but there is a progression where you can make money. There are the benefits. There's the ability to have more days off that helps your mental health. There's less stress that helps your mental health. So there are give and takes in whichever path you choose. You just have to find the path that's right for you.
All right, Ms. Haywood. Imagine this. You just got asked to be on the board of a voluntary bar association. You have a family, you have a life, you have a career. What advice would you want somebody to give you about whether or not you should get involved with yet another responsibility that you do not do anything halfway? You do everything all the way. What advice would you give them?
I would first and foremost advise them to speak to past presidents of that organization and the board. Like, speak to them, take them out, because past presidents or long-term members, they can really give you the temperature of that organization. I would also tell them to get involved with a board that they're passionate about. Because if you're getting involved with a board that you're just doing just to do, you're not going to give 100%. You're going to resent it. You're not going to, and it's unfortunate for the organization, right? So that's the two most important advice: is speak to others and do it because you are passionate about their mission, about their vision, but don't do it just to be a resume filler or just because. So that would be my main advice.
And my experience in the past with bar committees is that you do have people who just want a resume item, and that you'll have a meeting and a lot of people don't show up for those meetings. How important is it to show up once you've made that commitment?
Very, very, very important. I can't even stress it, because a lot of decisions are made. A lot of times boards meet monthly, and so a lot has to be accomplished during that time. And if you don't have quorum or if people are not prepared, that just is a time waster. You know, so it's very important to attend meetings. I've sat on various VBAs. I currently sit. The city of Tamarack has a Ruth Bader Ginsburg committee that I sit on currently, as well as another community board, and it's time consuming, right? Because you have to go and you have to sit, and they say 1 hour, but it'll be 3 hours, and then you're like, okay. So it's very important that if you have the time, that you have to make sure that you commit that time. And you have to, and I think you also have to speak to your family, right? If I'm married, I have 2 young kids, and just say, hey, this is what I'm being asked to do. Here's a time commitment. When I'm being asked to sit on the board, I always ask, what's the time commitment? And then make sure you get buy-in, because if you don't, then you're not going to do well. Because if your home's not doing well and you're trying to do a board, it's just going to show up. So you have to make sure you get a buy-in.
Oh, thank you. Well, this is our last question, and the question's going to go
I think
to
Ms. Borman has her hand up. I'm sorry, she had her hand up to answer the question.
Oh, Ms. Borman. All right, Ms. Borman, your turn, and then we'll move to the last question.
I just add one quick thing to follow in about the voluntary bar associations. I just have to pitch this. You were talking about boards, but before you get on a board, you have to be involved in the association. And what I will say, or even getting on committees. So you're in the association, getting on committees, which then leads to the board positions. What I will say to new attorneys, what I would say to attorneys that have never been involved, get involved. And once you commit and you're willing to do it, you may, and this was my journey on the rules of judicial administration. I got on the committee. I was on some internal operating procedure subcommittee that was probably one of the least colorful committees, is the best way I can put it, because it's rules. But I took it seriously, and because I was the one that took it seriously, they then made me like chair of that committee the next year, and that led me to another chair, and I ended up chairing the full committee. So my advice is don't be afraid. I was always afraid to get involved. Why would they want me? But don't be afraid, because they're looking for people that want to do it. And then you start working your way up.
Okay, well, we're going to stay with you for the last question and move to the other panelists. Again, imagine this. You are leaving a legacy. I don't know, maybe they're doing This Is Your Life. What legacy do you want to leave to your fellow attorneys in the profession, either where you're working now or the people who are still thinking about how to create their legacy?
Want me to kick it off?
Yes, please kick it off.
So I'll just say this very quickly. The thing that I am most proud of, my biggest achievement, I think hands down, that I'm very passionate about, is the mentoring that I've done. And I know that there's at least, and Judge Maynard, we have a mutual connection, is the law clerk program that I started, or not that I started, but I grew when I was at the court. The law clerks, the staff attorneys, helping them through and navigating their career, helping people I work with now. There's somebody else from my office that just passed the bar who's on this call that I wanted to have her watch this. Starting to mentor these young attorneys and seeing where they are. And next Friday, I'll be speaking at the investiture of one of my law clerks, who's now a county court judge in Palm Beach County, sort of the pinnacle. That makes me proud. That is, to me, my legacy that I'm most proud of. I just started a program at the clerk's office for those taking a gap year before they go to law school. I love mentoring. And to me, that is my proudest accomplishment and what I would want to leave as a legacy.
Well, we are running short on time, but we are not running short of information that I want to hear all of you share. So now, Judge, what kind of legacy do you want to leave in terms of what do you want to stand for?
Yeah, I started out talking about my experience with the judicial system, not as a lawyer, but just as a human being going through a very difficult time. And so for me, I want my legacy as a judge to be that when people come in my courtroom, be they victim, witness, party, defendant, litigant, attorney, that they feel seen, that they feel heard, that they feel respected, that they feel that we as a system are there to serve them as the public and not the other way around. They don't feel like a number or a folder or a case, but they feel like human beings and are treated as such. And I think if I can leave that legacy, I will have accomplished what I needed when I was in that space. And what I find in my courtroom is even if people don't agree with the ultimate decision, if they feel heard and if they feel respected, then they have an understanding and appreciation for our legal system. And so that's the legacy that I want to leave.
Thank you. Ms. Haywood, what is your legacy? What, at the end of the day, when people say, oh, you know her, she's the one, what do you want to hear them say?
She's the one who will always try to find you an answer. I do believe in everything that both the panelists have said, but I also, community education is huge. A lot of time lawyers or the judicial system has or may get a bad reputation. And I want to stand for that not being the case. That if they come across and they said, oh, you're a lawyer, which I get that a lot, which I probably should figure why they're saying that. But, oh, you're a lawyer? Wow, you're very excitable. You're down to earth. But that is, we're people too. We have a job that we have to do, but we can still be caring. We can still be, hey, I'll get that information for you. Let me connect you with Miss Boardman who can navigate the West Palm Beach. Let me connect you with Judge Maynard, so that way they know there's people who's actually caring and listening, because a lot of time people are not coming to court for happy reasons, unless they're getting married, maybe, or, adoptions, but a lot of time you're going in making life decisions. And so, let us educate the community, do it in a way that, like Judge Maynard said, is caring, is compassionate, mentoring those, like Ms. Borman said. So that's what I would want to leave.
Thank you. Well, this is a question that was not preset, but how do all of you feel about being contacted? I know we're all on the Florida Bar, find a lawyer website, but since we've run out of time for questions, there might be some really good questions for you folks that we're not able to get to. So are you all open to being contacted for follow-up?
Absolutely.
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 Well, thank you so much. And Katie, you were going to be monitoring the questions. Do we have any questions that we need to address right now before we wind up?
I do not currently see any questions in the Q&A.
All right, thank you. Well, then, thank you to all of the panelists. We really have appreciated this. I would like to just go to dinner with all of you and just pester you with more questions and share life events and challenges. And, I've just enjoyed this. It's been a wonderful conversation. And I want to thank the Florida Bar. I always like to tell people I actually met Henry Latimer. So I know he would be proud of this panel today and very proud of the job that the Florida Bar is doing with their Center for Professionalism. Now, in conclusion, I want to thank all of the attendees as well. We didn't get to meet you, but we hope we do, whether it be at a bar conference, whether it be at court, or whether it be at a Little League game or the PTA. We hope that you all stay involved in the law and find a way to reignite your careers and take advantage of all the opportunities that the Florida Bar has provided to you. Speaking of which, Jason Berger has a public service announcement. So Jason,
yeah,
take it away.
so there is a Supreme Court mandate, and this is an education piece, and they'll post it in the chat. But there is a new 2-hour professionalism course that is required by the Supreme Court. It's called Professionalism Expectations, and we'll send it to you in the chat so you can take a look. The other thing I wanted to say, I'll start with our panel. You all were fantastic. And I certainly learned something from each and every one of you. As far as the course, it is recorded, so it's free. So to our audience and our guests, thank you for choosing us. We certainly appreciate your attendance today. If you know someone that is unsatisfied, unhappy, or unchallenged, please give them this information or this seminar or your information. I would say, please don't leave the practice of law. As you heard today from this group, you can go from litigation to transactional. You can go from criminal to civil. You can go from state to federal and vice versa. Or you can get into the education piece. But what I heard over and over and over again is the word happy. There is a place in the practice of law for you to find your happiness. You worked hard for that degree. And certainly, as you heard from our speakers today, you can jump from one arena to the other. So thank you all for that. I would turn it over to Katie and Rebecca Bandy if they had anything from the Professionalism Center. Katie?
Thank you so much, Jason. I just want to add our CLE number for all of our attendees today. And thank you to our panelists. You all were phenomenal. I learned so much information. Your number today for this webinar is 8480. 8480. Thank you again to our panelists and our attendees.
And
thank you, guys.
Now, one last thank you. We're going to clap you out. Thank you so much. This concludes our webinar.